let's look briefly about how we got there. One of the things that I was tasked with as an instructional designer is that this simulation is actually a part of a much larger curriculum. And so we had to look at the learning objectives and what were the learning objectives and what were our goals and how were we going to measure those goals. We talked briefly about how the scores were set up, so how we were able to capture those percentages and then provide feedback based on those percentages. So before they even get to the simulation, we had two modules set up. We had an overview module where they learned about the different components of the bus and how that sort of feeds all together. And then we had an operations module where we talked about how the bus works. At the end of the operations module, we were giving them some information about how to actually play the simulation. In doing that, we also got them, we sort of started getting that gaming, that competitiveness in our learner, and actually got them excited about getting to play this game. And then we introduced the idea of that competition and then being able to compete with the leaderboard that we talked about earlier. I guess Jake was talking about leaderboard. One of the things we had to do in doing this, and if you design for a cell phone or design for anything at a mobile platform, is that there are things that you have to look at. When we start talking about the accelerometer, how does that work? I mean, how are we going to adjust that? The thing that you find with cell phones and with accelerometers is that these things are pretty sensitive. So we had to look at how, when you touch things on the screen, such as components, would, if your finger was off by 10 pixels, would that cause problems? So you had to look at things like that. We also talked briefly about the 4 levels and the 4 stops. And as we were doing, I think, in the DNA game and also with Jake, we had to, each level would get a little bit harder, so we kept that competition would keep developing, so we'd get a little bit harder, and we would provide feedback at the end of each level. But it's also really important to keep these levels short and to keep their attention. When designing for these types of devices, if you've noticed that everything we've looked at today, it's really bright and vibrant, but it's also pretty simple in nature. So we had to keep our illustrations pretty clear and standard colors to keep our processors not bogging down the processor. We introduced a leaderboard here. The leaderboard helped them to try to improve their scores, and then it actually was showing people in different areas of the country and how they were doing in those different areas. So I want to briefly get Ryan to talk about how we came about developing this from our design concepts and then how we made this a reality.
Yeah, so my job on the project was to figure out how this would all come together on a tablet. And so we came up with a solution here. And what we did, when you buy one of these buses, Lars is nice enough to give you a tablet, so that helps you learn. So we knew right away that we could target one tablet, which made development easier. What we also had is Lars has a lot of training that he's done in the past that was done in Flash, and he uses a learning management system called Adobe Connect. So we wanted to leverage that. We also wanted to leverage the login capability that already existed on Adobe Connect. So what we ended up doing, we used Adobe Air, which is a cousin partner of Flash. It works together with Flash, and we built the application in Flash and then used Adobe Air to publish it out as a native application for Android. And what we did, we didn't actually take the bus simulator and put it into the application. What we did, we made a shell application. So when you start up the tablet, you start up the application, and it's actually a shell that brings in the website. And that allows you to log into the website, and then from the website, that bottom picture where it says HTML, we have a mobile landing page, and Lars is able to update that mobile landing page at any time, adding new modules as they might come across, or videos, or anything he wants to link to. And the key here is that since we're using online content fed into our application, which is often called a hybrid app approach, Lars on his end can make any changes to the content he's trying to push out to these learners across the country without redeploying the app. This is something that's possible on Android. It's not. It gets a lot trickier when you deal with Apple, and they always wanting you to go through the App Store for updates and everything like that. But using the Android device, this was very possible. So we took advantage of the built-in user login that Lars already had on his LMS system. It was updatable by Lars, so if there's a new version of any one of these components, he can do it on his server, and it's automatically pulled into the app the next time you open it. And the tracking that goes along with Adobe Connect was built in also, so he can watch these people move through the courses and as they complete them. And we also, as Neil showed you earlier, there's that high scoreboard. So because you've logged into Adobe Connect, the game already knows who you are, where you live, and everything like that. And when you make a high score, it posts your name to the high scoreboard and puts your first name only and then the city that you're from. So those were all things that we took advantage of, and it was a unique approach and one we haven't really done before at JPL as far as using this application as a shell and then pulling in web content. And the early discussion was, well, do we need a shell to do this? Why can't we just use the browser that's on the tablet? And we quickly made the correct decision, I believe, in that if you load it in the browser, there's always the chance that the learner's gonna just hit the URL bar and go to Facebook and you've lost them. So this is basically using a browser, but we're putting a custom Chrome around it and not giving them the option to go away from the application. And there's a couple more technical advantages to having this hosted inside a native application, and we're gonna be at the table over there. So if you want to come play the game and ask very technical questions, I'd be happy to answer those. And if you want to learn how a hybrid bus works, Lars is a very great resource, and Neil will tell you all about the instruction design that went into this and the methodology behind it.
One of the things I would like to mention, with this being such a highly technical subject matter, by developing this in a hybrid approach, when Lars took this to his engineers, they were like, wait a minute, there's changes to go on here. So instead of having to then go back and recreate that in iOS and then send it back through, like we were saying, through iTunes, the iTunes store, we're able to make those correct changes pretty easily. If the bus changes down the road, if any of these variables change, Lars, as our client, is actually able to go back and make those changes himself.
Yeah, the one thing we did, there's a lot of math that goes on in that bus as far as physics that I had to reacquaint myself with, as far as going uphill, how much braking power and when those brakes are involved. So we actually made an XML document that Lars was able to see all these values, and as he played the game over at Voith, he was able to say, well, the brakes actually are more effective than that. So he could go in and change a number value, resave that XML file to the server, and the game was automatically updated with those values. So it really saved a lot of back and forth of me recompiling an entire program and redeploying it. And it probably saved us, I can't even imagine how many hours of Lars telling me to try number 3 instead of 4 and then redeploying it would have been a mess. So that was a great advantage.
The next excitement that we're looking at doing, is actually hooking this up to a physical brake pedal and a physical gas pedal. So we're taking it to almost a full simulation round. So it's coming back around, and then they'll be even more prepared once they get into the bus. Anything else, Laura?
So like we said, we'll be at the booth out there with any questions, and we're just about out of time.